Welcome to Fireside with Peter Adkison on Gen Con TV. On this show, we go in search of the untold stories behind your favorite games. And we are continuing our delve into Dungeons and Dragons with our legendary guest today of Tracy Hickman. Now, Tracy is most famous for his collaborations with Margaret Weis to create one of the most celebrated campaigns in D&D history, Dragonlance. Yes. Now wait, if you're thinking, I'm actually more of a fan of Ravenloft. Well, guess what? Tracy Hickman created that one too with his wife, Laura. So either way, we got you covered. So Tracy, hey, hi there. So glad to have you with me today.
It's awful good to be with you today, Peter. I'm wearing my News Chopper 5 helmet.
That's right.
And I'll be, in the breaks that we have here, I'll occasionally be reporting traffic to the local news stations. But, for now, we've got some time. So I thought I'd join you here.
Perfect. Yeah, we're catching you right during rush hour, aren't we there?
I believe so. If there is a rush hour in Salt Lake City, Utah, this is probably as close to it as we get. Nothing really much rushes here in Salt Lake. It moseys a lot.
Good. Well, that's why you have some downtime to chat with us. Okay.
Well, we have an old-timey station here, it is really old-timey. Okay. I'm broadcasting to you live and direct from the Tracy Hickman Control Center here in my home.
Great.
Yeah. I've got here in the back, I've got maps for a book I'm not going to write. And I've got, things going on. Well, they're pretty, but they are meaningless. And I've got meaningless stuff going on here on my monitor as well.
It looks like the Starship Enterprise, maybe only.
Yeah, pretty much. It is. It's a screensaver that I've got running back here, mostly so that it will look as though I'm actually working on something.
Perfect. Good. Yeah.
It fools a lot of people.
That's great. That's awesome. Well, I'm in what I call my fort. It's my fort. It's
so that's that bunker beneath your house, right? You kept telling me about. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. And
well, probably shouldn't have mentioned that, should I? I'm sorry.
Hey, we're here to talk about you and your life. I'm honestly been looking forward to this, Tracy, because we've had, you and I know each other pretty well. We've had conversations along the way, and we've always got along well. But you look back and I don't remember asking you questions like, where did you grow up? Like, where did you go to school? What was your childhood like?
Well, I mean, the obvious answer to that is I never did. And hopefully never will.
Yeah, hopefully not. Right.
Yeah. No, I was actually born here in Salt Lake City. My father was going to the University of Utah here. He was getting his degree here. We lived in a little tiny apartment building, or actually at the time we lived in a little apartment home. And my parents had gone to the Thanksgiving parade, actually, and walked all over the Thanksgiving parade to watch the parade that day. And I was born that night, so I think the parade had something to do with that.
That being born during the parade might be. I didn't know if you were going to say born or conceived, but either way.
Well, either way, it worked.
Yeah.
And so I can still remember, actually, and my brother was born 2 years later, and I mostly remember living in a quad apartment building on 3rd South, just below the University of Utah. My mother would take me over to, I think, around. Walk me up from 3rd South up to about walk me up to what was called North Temple, and we would get on the bus there, and we would go downtown on the bus. And if I was a good boy, which was seldom, but when I was a good boy, she would let me pull the rope on the bus to stop at our stop and get off. And I still have fond memories of that time.
What were your parents? What did they do?
Well, my father was actually in communication broadcasting. When he was in high school, he actually ran a radio station out of Beaver High School in southern Utah, and went into broadcasting down there. Did a lot of radio work. down there, and decided that he wanted to get a degree in broadcasting. So he went to University of Utah, got his degree in broadcasting there, got his master's degree. And then soon after that, he took a job as manager of a brand new educational television station in Ogden, Utah, which is about an hour north of town.
You kind of grew up in show business in a way.
Oh yeah, really. Some of my very early memories actually are going with my father to like the station and sitting down at the enormous control boards. Back in those days, they'd have huge control panels, and multiple monitors everywhere, and big fader bars that you'd have to push back and forth and select channels on that. And I kind of grew up in that environment. I'd often go to the stations with him down through the years and sit in the control booth and just watch this whole production process going on. It kind of became a part of me too as I grew up.
So did your family play games? I mean, was it a game playing
family? My family played lots of games. Oh yeah, absolutely. Every Christmas we would always get a game. And it might be, some really brand new game like Stratego. Yeah, I'm really old.
But that's a good one for,
Yeah.
I'm not talking about gateway drugs, because eventually we know where this is going eventually, right? And so it's setting the foundation, right? Stratego's good foundation forming material. Yeah.
It is. And I used to play with my brother. We used to play Risk a lot, which resulted in untold numbers of fights.
That was my gateway drug. My dad and I, some kids came over. He was a teacher, and some of his students came over one Saturday night and showed us Risk, and that was the beginning of the journey of from games like Pinochle and stuff like that into.
Oh well, everybody in my family played games. Growing up, I still can remember falling asleep in neighbors' beds because my parents always played bridge and would be in bridge groups that would play around the neighborhood. Whenever my grandparents, we would go visit my grandparents, there was always a bridge game that was being played there. So games were very much a part of our being raised.
All right. By the way, you're getting a hello from Australia. Daza287 saying hello from Australia.
Hello, Australia.
Yeah. I
love Australia. Yeah. I had a wonderful trip down to Australia for Gen Con Australia. Actually, some years back, my wife and I both went down to Brisbane and just loved going down under. Hope to get down there again as soon as we get this whole thing cleared up.
Yeah. Okay, so take me to college. Did you go to school?
No, you don't really want to go to college.
No.
Did I? Well, I graduated.
Are you an educated man, Tracy?
I am an erudite, educated man. No,
by the way,
not particularly.
he says, I feel honored to watch this episode. I love all Tracy's work. So.
Oh, that's very kind. Thank you very much.
Sounds like you have a true fan.
Yeah. Well, we're early in the episode, so you may change your mind by the end of it.
Yeah. We'll see what we can do to dissuade you, Daza, of that.
So. Yeah, those illusions. Yeah. Oh, I've got a story about that one too. Well, I wouldn't tell that story. That'd be a bad story to tell. So, great. I derail my own train of thought, of course.
Oh yeah, so like where you went to school? Did you go to a university somewhere? Did you learn how to write? I went to I graduated high school. Mm-hmm. Oh, good. Good.
Which is good.
Yeah. Good.
And it was a little iffy, but I made it.
How many years did it take you?
Let's see. 1, 2. Yeah. It was. I graduated high school, and after I graduated high school, I was moved actually to join missionary service, and was a missionary for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Mm-hmm. I put my papers in, submitted my request to become a missionary, and got the papers back saying that I had been called to the Singapore, Indonesia mission. And my high school education had been so good that I had absolutely no idea where that was in the world. It's, I don't know, China somewhere.
Yeah.
But we looked it up and discovered that it was, in fact, as far as I could go away from Utah
Yes.
and still be on dry land.
Mm-hmm.
So my father was quite excited about this. My mother, less enthusiastic. So then from there I went, as I entered missionary service, I asked my girlfriend at the time if she would wait for me. And without hesitation, she said instantly back to me, "No, I'm not going to wait for you." But I went anyway. And in those days, they taught us our language in Hawaii. So I flew to Hawaii. While I was in Hawaii, we had 2 months learning, and we'd gone through the 2 months learning, but our visas had not yet come through. So they had us do it twice while we were there. And the visas still had not come through. And so they actually released us from our calling to the Singapore, Indonesia mission and called us to the Hawaii, Honolulu mission, which was okay with me. And we'd been in the Hawaii, Honolulu mission for, I believe it was 2 whole months when our visas came through, because nobody told them to stop the process. And so we were released from the Hawaii mission and then called to the new Jakarta, Indonesia mission. So I spent the next 18 months on Java, where I got to know the wonderful people in Southeast Asia, and got to understand the great, amazing diversity in the world, and that everyone sees the world differently, but that is a good thing. Yeah. That it is in that diversity that we find joy and exploration, and our minds can be open to new possibilities and new ideas. Right. So the greatest thing I came away from my mission service was a tremendous love for all mankind, all around the world. So I came back from that. When I came back, the girl who said she wasn't going to wait for me had waited for me, and so we were married 2 months later, and we've been married ever since.
That's Laura. Yeah,
that's Laura.
That's excellent. Okay, so help me. We got to get to the D&D stuff here. So help me bridge this to D&D. How did you? Well, when did you?
It's really an easy bridge, quite frankly, because Laura is the one who introduced me to D&D.
Oh, well.
Yeah, I was working like 3 separate jobs trying to make ends meet, as newlyweds.
Are you still? I mean, you're still doing that, right?
Yeah, but I'm making more money than I was at the time. When I was still working as much, I'm just making more money. Right. And she was supposed to. I was working at a print shop. Actually, I was drilling holes in paper. I mean, it was a really exciting job. And she was supposed to come pick me up in our little Volkswagen Rabbit. I'd ridden my bike there, and she didn't show up. And what had happened? I knew she'd gone to help her girlfriend.
Let me guess, her D&D game ran long. Is that what happened?
Well, she had gone to what she thought was supposed to be a dramatic rehearsal, and when they got there, some of the people hadn't showed up, and so they just broke out the dice and started playing
D&D.
She said, "Have you ever played D&D?" Oh, yes, okay. So, and she forgot about her new husband. I thought the honeymoon was over. It was, right. So I rode my bike. I knew she'd gone to this play, so I rode my bike down to the local theater, and sure enough, there was my little Volkswagen, and I thought, oh, cow. So she came out of this. She was all excited. She said, "Oh, I just played this most amazing game. It's this Dungeons and Dragons game. It was just the most amazing thing." I said, "Well, okay. I played games most of my life. Okay." Yeah. So I said, "Fine. What is the board?" And she said, "Well, it doesn't have one." I said, "Well, okay. So what are the rules?" And she's, well, they're kind of flexible. And this sounded like the stupidest game I'd ever heard of. You make stuff up as you go? I mean, come on. You got the rules to a game. There's just a board, you got little pieces, you move around. So for my birthday that year, and this was, I think, in 1970, it was 1977.
Okay.
For my birthday, she had bought me, somehow scrounged some money together to buy me what we now know as the old Blue Basic set.
Right.
Uh-huh. And we called it the Blue Basic set, as everybody knows. We call it the Blue Basic set because TSR at the time couldn't afford to print 4-color on the cover of the rule book. And they didn't want to go with black and white because it sounded boring. So they went with blue and white, which sounded like kind of almost color.
Right.
And this was back in the day when polyhedral dice were so uncommon that the game actually came with a crayon.
Yep.
So that you could color in the numbers and read them. Yep. I still have the D20 from that set, by the way.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, which is so rounded, man. You roll that one and it just goes forever. The edges on it are thin.
Hey, I got to ask you a question. I don't know, maybe it's a little sensitive, but I was raised in a really religious environment too, Seventh-day Adventist, and did you ever have problems with the church, like just trying to discourage you from playing Dungeons and Dragons, or just wave me off if you don't want to get into that? Because
actually, it was really interesting. As you know, about the time that I was actually becoming a professional in this was right at the time when we hit all of the controversy and the 60 Minutes and all of that. And
Dark Dungeons and
yes, Dark Dungeon. Oh, I love Dark Dungeon. By the way, I enjoyed the movie. The book was good, but I thought the movie was great. And I was right there with, right in the middle of all that with the Chick publications and the whole thing.
Yep.
And there was there was a member of our church leadership who came down from Madison, actually down to Elkhorn, Wisconsin, which is where I was living at the time, and took me aside and asked me if there was anything in what I was doing that was that was contrary to our gospel, contrary to our teachings. And I told him honestly, no, that there was nothing here that I was doing. If anything, I was using this medium to teach truth, to help people believe in themselves, to help people understand basic truths. And he said, okay, that's all he needed to know. And that was the only thing that's ever been said to me about that. And I've gone to I've played D&D games up at Brigham Young University, and they've got a big crowd of people up there that are doing that. And I think there are some individuals, right?
Yeah, sure.
Who, as there are everywhere, who may have questions about that. But anytime I've run into them, I can just be very straight with them. And quite frankly, a lot of kids who played D&D early on in the Latter-day Saint community keep pointing at me and say, "Hey, he's
It's funny. I was playing D&D. I was running a D&D game at my high school, which was a religious high school, Seventh-day Adventist high school. And at one point, I got called in and told that that they didn't approve of the game, and then I couldn't run it at high school anymore. So I only lived 3 blocks from the high school, so I just moved my game to my home, and we kept playing.
Yeah, the subversive off-campus thing that you're doing here. Yeah, I know how that goes.
Yeah, I was a townie, so I was already.
Well, Laura and I had been playing. Laura and I have been playing the game, and here in down in Provo, Utah, which is about 40 miles south from where I live right now, in our newlywed, apartment down there. And it was coming up on that time when things were getting kind of funny, and there was actually a D&D group up in a little community called Heber that's northeast of Provo, where they would be playing in the high school, and there were some parents that were really upset and concerned about this. And so I can remember going to the big meeting that they had, the school board meeting that they had there, and there was a representative that had come from TSR at the time to address the concerns. And I don't remember who this individual was. They did a horrible job of it because they were trying to address the audience on a logical level. And for the audience, this was an emotional issue.
Right.
And the two of them did not connect at all. And I can still to this day remember the complete disconnect between these people, and the disconnect between the idea of trying to reason through the problem as opposed to address their emotional concerns about it.
Right.
And it's kind of guided my approach to that kind of controversy ever since, that you have to know where they're coming from. You have to understand their story before you can really properly communicate with them.
Yeah. All right, let's get you into the hallowed grounds of TSR. Since
is that hallowed or hollowed?
Hallowed.
Okay.
Grounds.
Oh, hallowed.
I was trying to stick with the religion theme here.
I see. We'll tread gently upon this hallowed ground. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. So how did you? So how did you get into TSR?
Well, having absolutely no tangible concept of IP copyright whatsoever at the time, my wife and I were struggling, and so as my wife said, I had actually used student loan money to purchase my first edition AD&D books.
Okay.
Okay. Now it's a sad truth in my life that it was the best use that money was ever put to. Because my education didn't help me all that much. As a matter of fact, I took a creative writing course at Brigham Young University and almost failed it. And that's a story that I could tell you sometime. It's an enjoyable tale. Anyway, we were struggling, and so she said, if you're going to keep spending money on this game, you got to find a way to make money at it. And so we started actually writing and producing and publishing AD&D adventures, which we called Night Ventures at the time. They were kind of intended to be self-contained, story-driven adventures.
Mm-hmm.
The first one that we produced was called Rahasya, and the second one we did was Pharaoh.
Now, did you put D&D on the book? Did you?
No, we didn't put D&D on the book. We actually we had the covers printed at the print shop where I was working on what we called leatherette back at that time. We actually photocopied the interiors. We would hand assemble them at my home and put binder's tape on by hand. Each one of those was bound by hand by Laura and I. And then I would take them over to the local market store, and in the meat department have them shrink wrap them.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
And we sent these out to distributors all around, around the country. And we were working on a thing which we called Vampire.
Yeah.
At the time, and we're running this vampire adventure on Halloween's for many years. Anyway, we really got into a bind. I mean, we were living in a little town called Logan, Utah. I had been a manager of the local movie theater there and had been fired from my job.
Right.
Could not find a job. Couldn't. That winter, we were on church welfare, and I couldn't actually take my kids to church because we couldn't afford shoes for the children.
Oh my gosh. So
in an effort to buy shoes for the kids that year, I sent these two adventures off to TSR hoping that they would buy them. I mean, the guy who would come out from TSR said that they might pay as much as $500 for an adventure, which at the time seemed like all the money in the world.
Yeah.
So we sent them in. As it turns out, Michael Gray, who was working at the company at the time and later became a vice president, I think, at Milton Bradley and Hasbro.
Bradley, and then eventually Hasbro. Yeah, I got to overlap with him a little bit after Hasbro bought us.
He was working at TSR at the time, and he had actually bought our adventures from the Dungeon Hobby Shop. so when this came across his desk, wondering if we would buy them, he said, "This guy's just really good. We need to hire this guy." And so they wrote back. They actually called us on our neighbor's phone because ours had been disconnected, and said, "Would you fly out here for an interview? It'd be easier to buy these if you worked for us."
Really?
Yeah. And so they flew me out.
So who was it? Mike Gray that made that call, or
well, Mike Gray suggested it. And I flew out.
So Mike Gray saw your work and said, "We need this guy.
We need this guy." And so I came. I was picked up by Steve.
Steve Winter?
No, it wasn't Steve Winter. He was the manager. Actually, he was actually my boss at the time. I didn't know it. He was such a young guy. I thought he was some flunky that they'd sent out to pick me up at the airport. And it turns out he was the guy who interviewed me for the job after we got to the company.
Right. Oh, that's great.
And Harold Johnson took me out to dinner that night at the Playboy Club, which is the only time I ever got to go to the Playboy Club. But they offered me a job. And so with no prospects in Utah, what year
is this? What year is this?
Oh, this was like, I think 81, 82, 81, yeah. I think.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And then, so we got in our little Volkswagen with our then 2 kids, and became the first members of my family to cross the plains going the other way.
By the way, 1980, that's the same year I graduated from high school. So there you go. I always thought you might be a little older than me.
I can remember showing up at work half an hour before they opened just to make sure I would be there on time. And I parked my little Volkswagen outside the old hotel building in downtown Lake Geneva, and waited in the cold for somebody to show up and open the door so I could go in.
Wow.
Yeah. I remember actually the first time I saw Gary Gygax was in the Dungeon Hobby Shop there.
Yeah.
And I was just I was speechless. I couldn't approach him or talk to him because it was Gary Gygax, and I was so awestruck that I couldn't say anything at the time.
Okay, well, now you must have gotten over that eventually, or did he leave before? I mean, you gotta give us a Gary Gygax story. So you brought up The Godfather,
I didn't get to talk with Gary very much because I did all my work actually as a non-star at TSR. The big stars at TSR when I was there were Dave Zeb Cook.
Yep, sure.
And Mark Akers. And so anytime management wanted something big done, mm-hmm. they would assign it to one of those 2 guys. And in a strange way, I've always been grateful to both of them because I was able to create Dragonlance and create Dragonlance and all of the product there without management really having much input into it. They were always talking to either Mark Akers or Dave Cook, and so they kind of took all the arrows and allowed me to do the room to do some really creative stuff.
So I want to get into Dragonlance here real soon because we're like halfway through our time already. But I have to ask you, what were you doing that wasn't being a star? Like tell us a little bit of what sort of grunt work you had to do before the glory days of Dragonlance.
Well, I'll take us back just a little bit. My wife and I got in our Volkswagen in here in Utah and started crossing the plains the other way. And as we were driving across the plains, there's an awful lot of plains. Okay.
Yeah. I've driven it a few times.
Yeah. So we had a lot of time on our hands. And so as we were driving across the plains, Laura and I were talking about what was there that we could bring to the company that would justify them actually paying us money to write games.
Yeah. Crazy.
And so it was while driving across those plains with our family in our little Volkswagen, just desperate for work and to do something, and to bring something with us.
It's so heartwarming. It's
well, that's where Dragonlance was born. It was we were driving across those plains and talking about, you know, a world of where dragons were being ridden into war. And so and came up with the name. The two of us came up with the name Dragonlance when we came to the company, as we were crossing the plains to the company. So once we got there, I hadn't been there actually for very long, and this was back in the early '80s. Back then, all of the rage was to hire a consulting group, right? An outside consulting group. I went
through that phase myself too.
Yeah. Okay. Fine.
Yeah.
So
it didn't stick. Don't worry.
Well, and it's a good thing.
Yeah.
So because, you know, outside consulting groups, I'm sorry, they just don't know your business the way you do. So this outside consulting group came in. They hired this consulting group to come in, and the consulting group, they spent huge amounts of money on this consulting group. And the report came in, and they gathered us all together to read the précis of this report and what they learned from it. And I can still remember Penny was the one who read it to us.
Penny Williams now, right?
Yes, Penny Williams now. Mm-hmm. And she's, as I recall, she was the one who read it to us. And she cracked this report, and it said, 1, your main product is Dungeons and Dragons. 2, you have lots of dungeons. 3, you need more dragons.
So the consultants were right.
They were right.
The consultants were right. Wow. Tracy, I think this is the first.
Taking this to heart, okay, because we'd spent a lot of money on it. Mm-hmm. It just so happened that I had this idea for a series of modules that featured dragons. And we had, I wrote it up, the initial proposal on it. At the time, in the Monster Manual, the original Monster Manual, there were 12 dragons, 6 chromatics and right, 6 metallics.
Sure. Yeah. The classic.
And so I proposed doing a series of 12 modules, each of which would feature, you know,
one of
these dragons.
Sure.
And they liked the idea of that. But I also knew, as my wife and I had one of the things my wife and I worked very hard to do is to bring story into role-playing games.
Right.
Because many of the games at the time were very much oriented toward, you know, go in, kill the monster, take his treasure, buy more stuff, kill a bigger monster, take more treasure.
Yeah, and go up levels.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Go up levels.
And to go up levels. And so what I knew is that I didn't want to have like the Dragon of the Month Club, you know, that we'd kill a red dragon, take its stuff, kill a white dragon, take its stuff. And so we had developed this entire story. Laura and I had started working out this story. And so we went in, started fleshing it out, and where this would be a world where there was a continuous story that carried through all 12 of these modules. It was a very radical concept at the time. No one had ever done it. No one had ever actually tried to put story into games to that extent, the role-playing games to that extent.
Well, role-playing itself was so new. I mean,
oh, absolutely.
Right. I mean,
so everything was innovative and everything was cutting edge. We had Harold Johnson came on board with that, and who was manager, I think, at the time of the creatives. We approached Larry Elmore, and we actually started building this whole thing quietly.
Now it's a shame, but there's probably some there might be some younger members of our audience who don't know who Larry Elmore is, and they should. He is.
Well, they ought to.
He is a master of fantasy art. He is one of the greats.
Absolutely, and he was one of
TSR.
Well, and there was the art department at TSR in those days was it was an all-star team. I mean, it was an absolute absolute gold medal team. Larry Elmore kind of was heading the artists at the time. Yeah. Clyde Caldwell was there at the time.
Jeff Easley would have been there then already.
Jeff Easley was there as well, and Parkinson.
Keith
Parkinson was there at the time. Yes. Keith, the most amazing artist, whom I loved and miss terribly now.
But by the way, you're right in this inception of Dragonlance moment. We had a friend, we had a question from chat from Fires of Athelion. Here's a question. What influences did Tracy draw upon when creating Krynn?
Let's see. What influences? We had read a lot of...
I mean, you listed the Monster Manual.
Well, the Monster Manual, for one.
But like, I think he means, or she means, what fiction were you a fan of as you were growing up? Did you read a lot of fantasy?
I actually read a lot of science fiction as I was growing up. Isaac Asimov in particular was a big influence on me.
Okay.
Arthur C. Clarke, not so much. Arthur C. Clarke wrote primarily technical sci-fi, whereas Asimov wrote about people, and I loved the fact that he wrote about people. I actually got to meet Isaac Asimov at a celebration for him in New York.
You see, there's a movie. Fifth Column is coming out as a movie.
Yeah, I'm very excited about that. And for that matter, I think there's a series that David Goyer is doing on Foundation, which I'm really excited to see. But I think Asimov was a huge influence on me. Tolkien obviously was a huge influence on me, and I read voraciously as a kid.
Right.
When I was growing up, my parents, we were in Las Vegas at the time. We went on a vacation to the Grand Canyon. And I was sitting in the back of the car, me and my brother back there, kind of rolling around like puppies, because who knew what seatbelts were back then?
Of course.
And we'd launch, you hurtle across the desert in these huge, massive pieces of metal.
Steel, American steel.
American steel, man. A lot of power and a lot of gas. And and my dad would say, "Wow, look at this over here, look at this over here." And my nose would be in a book, man. And my dad would say, "Oh, son, you got to look outside the book a little bit here. You look at this great scenery. Here's the Grand Canyon." I tell you that story because years and years later, I was living in Flagstaff, living and writing in Flagstaff, and I got a phone call from a guy out of the blue. The local bookstore, for reasons I can't explain, had given this guy my phone number. And he said, "I'm sorry to bother you at home." He said, "I'm a father. I've driven across the country to bring my son to the Grand Canyon. We've been on vacation this whole time. Nothing I've done has interested him. He's done nothing but talk about your books. Could you please come Tracy. Over to the hotel,
Tracy,
and just say hello?" Just So I said, "Absolutely. Where you at?" And he told me. I gathered together some books, and Laura and I drove over there, met them in the lobby, sat down with this young man, and he was so starstruck and so excited to see me, and so animated. We talked about characters. I sat down with him in the lobby, and we talked about the books and who his favorite characters were and what he liked about the books. And I told him what it was like to write books, and we signed books for him and gave them to him. And I can remember still looking up past the back of the couch at his two parents. Oh, who were so relieved that they had given something to their son that
Right.
he would remember from this
Oh,
trip.
that's a great story.
So yeah,
I get something.
I was that kid when I was a boy. So
it's great. I had it. I got to tell you mine. I had it at 1 year at Gen Con. This was about 10 years ago or so. This gal comes up and this kid, she's like, she's a teenager, older teenager. And she's like, can I give you a hug? And of course I'm like, okay,
yeah.
Cause you don't want to be that guy. Right.
Yeah.
And she says, okay, she gives me a hug. She's like, I gotta tell you, I've been to every Gen Con since I was conceived. I was conceived at Gen Con, and everyone said 17 of them, and just like, okay.
Apparently, what happens at Gen Con stays at Gen Con.
Exactly.
I see.
Right. By the way, one of the people on chat, Bloodwild, says his background is actually Lord Soth's Charge by Keith Parkinson. And anyway, there's some good comments coming up about about the art. We were talking about Elmore and Parkinson.
A quick story about Lord Soth.
Yes.
Margaret and I were working on the.
Yeah, let's give a Dragonlance story here.
Dragonlance story in here. I was actually working at the time in creating the module for the High Claris Tower, and we had just come out with a product that was. It was a miniatures game for D&D that was compatible with D&D, and we were asked to put the miniatures rules for the battle of the High Claris Tower in the game. So I was working on units, right, to for this war game to like come and assail the walls of the High Claris Tower. When I came up with this Death Knight and flanked by banshees, and it turned out to be the most kick-ass unit on the board. I mean, it was just cleaning the boards of stuff.
Right.
And as soon as I saw this Death Knight, as soon as I realized, thought about this Death Knight, I knew Lord Soth. I knew his name, I knew his history, I knew his story, I knew where he was from and what he wanted. He like exploded, fully realized in my head.
Yeah.
And I can remember still running over to Margaret Weiss's cubicle and saying, I have to tell you about this character. And as soon as I did, she knew it. She had it. It was all there. Ever since then, we've been trying to keep this guy in a box. Every time he walks on stage, he takes over. He takes over the story, he takes over the scene, and he starts dragging it off wherever it is he wants. And we really, literally have to beat him out of the story to get back to the plot.
Oh my God.
Because whenever he shows up, he just takes over everything. It's a fascinating writing experience, actually.
I want to move on to Ravenloft and your whole life, the rest of your life, but you got to tell me more about this. Like, what do you mean?
You know, we could do this again. Yeah, this is not a one-shot thing here. You know, I actually like you, Peter, and we could actually try this again.
I like
sometime.
you, Tracy.
Well, there you go.
I was giddy today knowing that we get to hang out. So what? And I think I know what you mean by this. But explain it to anybody that might watch this. What do you mean that Soth would just take over when you let him out of the box?
Well, okay, I have kind of a writing philosophy, and actually it's a philosophy that I try to, I apply in a lot of areas of my life. And that is that a plot in many ways is like trying to hang on to a handful of marbles. If you have an outline and then you try to hang on to the outline too tightly, right? Mm-hmm. Then you start forcing characters doing things that they really wouldn't want to do, and the plot starts to bend in ways it just doesn't feel natural, and you try to force it this way. Well, you end up squeezing too hard and you lose your marbles. If, on the other hand, you say, oh, I'm going to let the characters go wherever they want, they're just going to like follow them wherever they go. And there's some people, I guess, who do like to write this way. But for me, it means I'm opening my hand, I'm letting the marbles do whatever they want. it lacks any kind of structure or direction, and the marbles all roll off, and I've lost all my marbles again.
Yeah.
But if you hold a shape, you hold your hand in a shape, a cupping shape, and let the marbles settle naturally into that form.
Right.
Then the characters are never forced to do anything that they wouldn't normally do, but you still have the structure. You've still got the flow of the plot. You've still interesting and exciting things happen when characters do that take you in different directions. But that's great because it means that the entire thing remains, as my wife likes to say, organic.
Right.
Yeah. The problem with Lord Soth is that he wants to open up the hand and drag it away. He is such a forceful character and such an interesting character and a character of tragedy that he will try to move the fingers on you, and that's kind of the way it is with him.
Yeah. You're getting some nice comments on chat, by the way, Tracy. For that, that's good. Good story. Good analogy. Yeah. Okay, so we got like a few more minutes to talk about. I say something about Ravenloft. Okay, like how did Ravenloft happen? Like, how did?
Okay, Ravenloft was. I know we got to get all of this in. Ravenloft actually came from a D&D game that I was playing with a fellow when I was very early on in D&D. And we'd fought some kobolds and we fought some orcs, and it was one of those dungeons, and here's the guard room for reasons. I don't know why there's a guard room there, but okay.
Yeah.
And we turned a corner and there was a vampire. And I remember thinking, what are you doing here?
Right.
You're a vampire. Have some pride. So I started doing a lot of research actually into vampiric lore.
Right. Uh-huh.
And the more I studied Stoker, and hi, come say hello.
Oh, you're kidding.
Oh yeah, you should come say hello. Speaking of Ravenloft,
Laura, how are you doing?
Yes, Strahd is my baby.
Oh no. Oh,
good.
We're gonna have to talk about that.
He's probably my oldest child. Think about it.
Yeah. Tell us. Yeah. You can hang out here and tell us about Strahd.
Well, I'm gonna tell a story.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Yeah, any minute now, he's going to have you on because you're so much better looking.
Great to see you. Great to see you, Laura.
So we started studying vampiric lore and came to realize that the character of the vampire is actually a feminine story archetype. That he represents the too good suitor, or what is called a Bluebeard. He is the monster who looks good,
right?
And who is seductive, and that was very much evident in Bram Stoker's work. As a matter of fact, the more we research this, the more we realize that the first modern vampire story, which was, I believe, called Vampire, was actually done by Dr. Polydorus on the same weekend that Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein.
Mm.
And that the first version of the vampire was actually a warning tale about Lord Byron, who was also an abuser of women and very much the Bluebeard character. And so we wanted to create. We felt that the character, to do the character justice, needed its own setting. And I was very much, influenced, I think, to a great extent by the Whale films and the old Dracula films.
Sure.
And so I wanted to create that. We wanted to create that special setting that worked just for this character, so that we could highlight that character and deal properly with the character. So it all really came from turning around a corner and seeing a vampire and thinking, boy, Have some pride, buddy. You don't belong in here as an extra. You need your own. You need your own space.
You need your own show. Your
And
own
quite
set.
and quite frankly, when we did the the most recent Curse of Strahd with in 5th edition, well, which was a great experience, by the way. That was the very first thing I told them, is that the vampire was a monster and had to be a monster. Strahd does not glitter.
Right.
And as a matter of fact, I personally feel that the whole Twilight vampire thing does a really great disservice to women, in that it glorifies the monster that they really need to be wary of.
Yeah. Yeah.
See, we did get something in on Strahd after all.
No, it's great. And, really, the most important thing to talk about these is that core piece, right? The origin story, the central idea. I got to tell you, I'm sure your time out at Wizards, I don't know if you ever got a chance to meet my sister Joyce. But boy,
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, but boy, she was a big Ravenloft fan. I mean, that was her jam. She ran a Ravenloft campaign. I played in her Ravenloft campaign, and it's somebody. You have so many people out there, Tracy, who've just put a huge part of themselves into these worlds that you've created.
Well, it wasn't. It's important to note that it wasn't just me.
Well, yeah.
My wife, of course, Laura, of course, has been there in every creative endeavor that I've ever done, and has been very much in some ways, a silent and unsung partner in all of that. My association with Margaret Weisdown through the years, we're great friends and love making wonderful things for people, and hope to be able to make more wonderful things for people together. But even beyond that, Larry Elmore was there with Dragonlance from the very beginning. Many of the artists were there from the very beginning and gave us our foothold. And a lot of unsung people, really, who've made it possible down through the years for these things to be. I always try to remember them.
So what do you when you reflect back on working on Dragonlance, Ravenloft, working at TSR, with Wizards, our time together, what do you take from that? Like, what do you hold on to when you look back at that time?
I look back at that time, and what I take away from that is that we are the tribe of the makers. I love being of the tribe of the makers, of associating with people who are creative people, who are thinking people, who are, it's so easy to tear something down. It's much more difficult to build something.
Yeah.
And to build something that it has meaning and that influences people. But to me, it's the nobler thing to do. And so the thing I take away from my associations, both at TSR and at Wizards of the Coast, and the many people that I've been able to work with down through the years, is the joy in being a maker with them. That all of us have been building things together, and trying through those endeavors to make a better world.
Yeah.
We don't. I've always tried to write. I've always tried to write and create things that show us who we could be, and who we should be, rather than who we are.
Well, excellently said, Tracy. Very excellently said. Hey, we just have a few minutes left. I gotta give you a chance to tell us what you're doing now. Like, what is? Can you talk about Void? I
can talk about the Void a little bit.
Yeah.
It's the Void's. I've been working as the director of story at the Void for some time, and we're a destination virtual reality place. That's been amazing. I've gotten to write official Star Wars canon while I was there. I've got to write Ghostbusters. I actually got to direct Dan Aykroyd, of all things.
Oh my gosh.
I
Really?
know, it was crazy. That's a story for another time. I've gotten to write for Jumanji,
Mm-hmm.
and with and worked with both writers for Wreck-It Ralph and Marvel Avengers. I mean, who gets to play with all of these things? And I've been working on new stuff, which I can't tell you about, but all of which is very, very exciting.
Good, Tracy. I'm really glad that you're working on something you can't tell us about. I mean,
Absolutely.
That's always important to have that hanging out there. Right?
COVID has, of course, been a very difficult thing for us because the Void is pretty much a miniature amusement park, and
By
we
the
have
way,
all the same problems.
Kerensky on chat has been to the Void and says it is so awesome.
It is so very awesome, and I'm hoping everybody will get a chance to do that in the near future.
So
but beyond that, there's always new stuff that's coming.
So now you said but it is a place. I apologize. I don't know. I seriously.
Oh yeah, it's a destination VR, and so you come to our place and you put on our rig that's self-contained. Mm-hmm. A haptic vest and a helmet that is entirely self-contained, and then we put you on our stage, and our stage has walls, and we map the digital world over the wall, so that if you see a wall, you can actually touch it. If there's a bench, you can sit on it. If there's a blaster rifle, pick it up and use it. And we create amazing versions of these worlds, completely immersive. Star Wars is one of my favorite places to go. It's astonishing.
Wow. And this is in Salt Lake City?
Actually, no. We have our development facility here, but our locations are all through Southern California, Atlanta. We have one in Genting, Malaysia. I mean, there's
multiple locations.
Yeah, multiple locations. Yeah, wow. If we can get through COVID, yeah, happy day.
Yeah, are they all closed because of COVID?
Yeah, they're all closed right now because of COVID. Have been since for the last few months, and it's hard.
Yeah,
but it's hard on everybody. We've got to find our way through this.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, it's been hard for us too, Gen Con, and yeah.
But we find a way. And that's the important thing. We're gonna find our way through this, and thank goodness for board games, huh?
Yes.
Get us through this whole thing.
I've been enjoying learning about how to play certain games online. I've been learning, Fantasy Grounds, Roll20, Discord, Tabletopia. It's
my wife and I every night we have this big wraparound porch in our at our home, and we've got this great patio set that's on this wraparound porch. So every night as the sun goes down, we go out front, we take our iPads with us. We play Jaipur on our iPads.
Okay, sure.
Against each other, and we play Gin Rummy on our iPads against each other. Yeah. And then we watch, and then people in our neighborhood, because of COVID, have started coming out in the evenings and walking around the block, and we talk with them just from our porch and in the cool of the evening. And if anything, it has taught me that it is our communities that define us. That's why the gaming community is so important to me.
Right. The tribe of the makers.
The tribe of the makers, and why we need to find our way through this and maintain that wonderful joy we have of being around the table and going somewhere new.
Right. Well, we will get through this, Tracy.
We will, and we'll do this again.
Yes, we will get through this this pandemic, and we have just gotten through another episode of Fireside with Peter Adkison. Our next show won't be during our typical time slot of Wednesdays at 4 p.m. We have this thing called Gen Con Online that's happening next week, so I am getting pushed aside. I mean, I'm getting rescheduled to a more optimum time, which will be Sunday morning, August 7th. At 7 a.m. Pacific or 10 a.m. Gen Con time, which is Eastern time. For my next episode of Fireside with Peter Adkison. And for that episode, Mary Kirchhoff will return and help me co-interview Bob Salvatore, which will be our guest in the next episode. What? Huh? I'm kidding. Oh, I'm back. Okay. So next week's going to be really busy with all sorts of great programming at Gen Con. So my advice is just to block out July 30 to August 2nd and treat yourself to the best 4 days of COVID gaming. Yes, that's right. Okay, so hey, once again, thanks again very much to our guest, Tracy Hickman. What a great time we had together. Thanks also to our studio manager, Marcus Mays, our streaming coordinator, Lauren Bond, our producer, Derek Gooder, to Gen Con TV for hosting us. And most of all, thank you for watching.